My dad told me I didn't belong in the family, so I let him use the bloodline clause to try and erase me, then used it to prove he was never family to begin with. They say grief sharpens everything. The first lie, the last conversation, the look someone gave you 15 years ago that suddenly makes sense. I didn't expect my turning point to come 3 days after Elvira Calderon's funeral. But that was when Victor, my legal father, family patriarch, the man who made boardrooms tremble, looked me in the eye and said, "You're not one of us, Rachel. Not by blood, not by legacy, not by right." He didn't raise his voice. Victor never needed to. He had mastered the art of cutting you apart with perfect diction. We were in Elvira's study. Same velvet curtains, same antique desk. The same room where I used to sit on the floor as a child while she read me the Latin inscriptions etched into her bookshelves. She was barely in the ground, and he was already wiping me from the ledger. "I don't know what you're hoping to get from the will," he said, straightening his cufflinks. "But the Calderon trust is clear. Only bloodline descendants qualify. You're not mine. You never were." I didn't speak, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to remember the moment he showed me who he really was. "You'll get a call from Harrison," he added. "We're filing a formal challenge before the reading. You can fight it if you want, but I wouldn't waste the legal fees." He left like that. No pause, no apology. He'd spent my entire life making me feel like a borrowed name. Now I knew why. And the truth. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would, because somewhere deep in my gut, I'd always known something didn't fit. The way he looked through me, the way I had to earn smiles other people got for free. He didn't love me less because I was difficult. He loved me less because I wasn't his. I stayed in Elvira's chair long after the door closed. Let the silence sit. Let the betrayal sink in, not to make it worse, but to make it useful. Because Victor thought he'd ended something. What he didn't realize was that he'd just opened a door I didn't know existed. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. 2 words. "Talk tonight." I looked at the screen, then at Elvira's portrait. She used to say, "Blood can carry you or bury you. You choose which." And if Victor wanted to invoke bloodlines, I was ready to burn down the family tree. My mother met me at a wine bar in the city, the kind with dim lighting, clean napkins, and servers who don't ask questions. She was already there when I arrived, half-finished glass in front of her fingers, tracing the rim like it might answer for her. I sat without a word. We didn't hug. We rarely did. For a minute, the only sound between us was the buzz of distant conversation and her fingernail tapping glass. Then she said it flat, simple, and devastating. "Victor isn't your father." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for 29 years. "I wanted to tell you," she added. I looked at her. "You mean you wanted to never tell me until he forced your hand?" She didn't deny it, and I didn't let her apologize. There are some truths that don't need soft landings. "Who?" I asked. She looked down, then reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo, faded at the edges, creased like it had been unfolded and refolded 100 times. The man standing in the photo wasn't Victor. No sharp suit, no practiced smile. Just a younger version of someone thoughtful, messy, real. Gabriel Calderon, Victor's brother. I studied the photo not for recognition, but for resemblance. Same eyes, same jaw, same kind of seriousness that could be mistaken for detachment. My mother spoke carefully, like each word weighed more than the last. "We were together before Victor. It wasn't casual. We were in love." "So what happened, Switzerland?" she said. "Gabriel got a grant. I stayed. He left. And Victor. He waited. And when the timing was right, he offered me stability. Offered you a name." I hated how clinical that sounded. Like I was a bargaining chip in someone else's power game. I thought it was the right choice, she added. For both of us. I let the silence stretch, not to punish her, but to decide what I needed from her now. And what I didn't. "He always knew I asked." She nodded. "I told him when I was 2 months pregnant. He said we'd pretend. That it would protect your future, protect it from what I asked. The truth from being erased," she whispered. That hit harder than she realized. Because it wasn't the lie that hurt. It was how easily Victor had decided I was disposable the second I stopped being useful. I folded the photo and slipped it into my coat pocket. "Does Gabriel know?" She hesitated. "No." "Where is he?" "Oregon. South Coast. still working in research, keeps to himself. I stood up. Rachel. I paused. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed, she said. Not of you. Of what I allowed. I didn't offer comfort. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, you thought you were protecting me from not having a name, but what you really did was give the wrong man the power to strip it from me. Then I walked out. I didn't cry in the elevator, didn't scream in the car. I drove straight to my apartment, booked a one-way ticket to Oregon, and stared at the photo until my eyes stopped seeing it and started seeing him. Gabriel Calderon, the man I might belong to, but also maybe the man who'd explain why Victor had always looked at me like I was a threat. I wasn't going to Oregon for closure, I was going for proof. And something deeper was forming beneath the surface, something colder than rage and sharper than grief. Because if Gabriel was the bloodline Victor had tried to bury, I was about to dig it up. I arrived in Brookhaven, Oregon, under gray skies and salt wind. The kind of town that doesn't ask questions because no one stays long enough to hear the answers. Gabriel Calderon lived in a weather-worn house overlooking the cliff. Not big, not manicured, but honest. The kind of place that didn't apologize for itself. I knocked once. He opened the door halfway, then froze. It wasn't recognition, not quite. It was calculation, like he'd seen a ghost and needed a second to decide if he believed in one. I'm Rachel, I said. A beat passed. Then he opened the door wider and stepped back. Inside, everything smelled like paper and salt air. There were books stacked on windowsills, coffee rings on scientific journals, and a lab coat hanging on the back of a kitchen chair. He poured coffee without asking, sat across from me with the slow gravity of someone who never rushed through anything. You look like her, he said. I didn't need to ask who. I'm not here for sentiment, I told him. I need to confirm something. I pulled the DNA kit from my bag, unfolded it carefully, slid it across the table. Gabriel didn't blink, didn't ask for an explanation. Just opened the box, swabbed his mouth, sealed it, and slid it back. Quiet, precise, no resistance. I always wondered, he said softly. But no one ever said a word. Victor knew, I said. He used it. He's trying to cut me out of the family trust. Gabriel nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Of course he is. I'm not asking for anything from you, I added. But if I'm your daughter, I want the truth in writing. You'll have it, he said. And that was it. No dramatic reveal, no teary embrace. Just two people at a kitchen table realizing a shared truth had been kept from both of them. The courier came an hour later to pick up the samples. 48 hours, they said. I didn't plan to stay that long. But as I stood to leave, Gabriel said Elvira knew. I turned back. She sent me a letter once, he continued. A year before she died. Said family trees lie, but instincts don't. I didn't understand what she meant until now. I let that sink in. Then asked the question that had been buzzing in the back of my skull since Victor's words hit the air. Why didn't she ever tell him to stop? Gabriel gave me a long look. Maybe she thought he'd destroy himself faster if no one stopped him. I exhaled. He wasn't wrong. As I drove back into town, clouds thickening above me, I realized something had shifted. I didn't feel erased anymore. I felt unfinished. Because proving Gabriel was my father might save my claim. But it wouldn't explain why Victor had been so confident, so certain, so calm, almost like he had something of his own to hide. I didn't go back to Philadelphia right away. Instead, I booked a detour. Not because I needed air or time or whatever people tell themselves when they're avoiding pain. I needed answers, and I knew exactly who had them. Bernard Whitmore had been my grandmother's personal attorney for over 20 years. He wasn't loud like Harrison. He didn't do glossy press. But Elvira trusted him enough to let him rewrite her will twice. I called his office, used her name, he told me to come in. When I walked into his study-like office, he didn't stand. Just looked at me like I had already stepped into the middle of a chess match. You have her eyes, he said quietly. Everyone keeps saying that, I replied. But I'm not here for poetry. He nodded once. Then let's talk legacy. We sat. No coffee, no small talk. Just facts. I know you can't tell me what's in the will, I said, but you can tell me whether she knew. About Victor, about me. Bernard leaned back, exhaled through his nose, like someone about to violate 10 ethical codes out of principle. Elvira was aware of the complexity in her bloodline, he said. She also understood how fragile legacy becomes when it's placed in the wrong hands. That's not an answer. She didn't leave answers, he replied. She left insurance. He opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. Elvira instructed me to read this only if lineage was formally challenged during the will reading. Not before. I stared at the envelope. You've read it. A beat passed. Then he smiled barely. I said I wouldn't read it. I didn't say I wasn't curious. What's in it? She wrote what she never dared say aloud. About you, about Victor, about how bloodlines can be forged or fabricated. I felt my pulse shift. She knew something I said, something big. Bernard nodded. And she knew Victor would come for you. That's why she protected what mattered. But she also knew Victor wouldn't stop unless someone made him. Made him how? He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a second file across the desk, thin, almost too neat. I opened it. Inside was a petition filed just 2 days ago by Victor through Harrison seeking a delay in the will reading due to contested biological legitimacy of an heir. He'd already moved, fast, aggressively. But here's what chilled me. The petition didn't mention me by name. It referenced unverified heirs presenting potential risk to trust stability. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He was preparing for something bigger. Why would he use that wording, I asked. Why keep it vague? Bernard's eyes met mine. Because when men like Victor move that carefully, it's not to protect themselves from you. He leaned forward. It's to protect themselves from something they're terrified you'll find first. That hit like a crack in the floor beneath me. I'd come here thinking I was playing catch-up. Now I realized I might be the one holding the match. And the thing Victor was guarding, it wasn't just the fortune. It was something about his past. Something he couldn't afford for me to expose. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a lie you didn't see coming. It doesn't scream. It listens. And mine started the moment I walked out of Bernard's office. Victor wasn't just defending a name. He was hiding something. Something buried so deep he'd rather torch the family legacy than let it surface. And I was done being polite. I didn't call Gabriel. I didn't update my mother. I flew straight to Philadelphia and started digging. Not into the present, into the past. Public records, medical registries, baptism announcements. Anything with a name, a date, a shadow of truth. For a man obsessed with bloodlines, Victor Calderon left surprisingly few traces of his own. No hospital birth certificate. No early school records before age 5. No paper trail until he was already stamped with the Calderon surname. Odd. But the odd became damning when I visited a former nurse from the same clinic Elvira once donated to the same clinic where Victor was supposedly born. Her name was Mrs. Lansing, 79, sharp as glass. She looked at the photo I handed her young Victor toddler Gabriel and Elvira, smiling like the war was finally over. She stared for a long time, then said, "That boy. He wasn't born here, I remember." The Calderons came in one day with him already in their arms. Said he was theirs, no chart, no maternity file, just a baby. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. You're sure I was on night shift for 17 years? I remember every delivery I helped with. I would have remembered a Calderon birth. Trust me, I did. I left her house with a copy of an old personnel file, listing an adoption intake flagged as confidential. Private family arrangement. No name, no timestamp, but the dates matched. The gaps matched, and most importantly, the silence matched. Victor Calderon was not Elvira's biological son. He had never been. And the empire he built, the name he guarded like a crown, the bloodline he used as a weapon against me, wasn't even his to begin with. I drove to the edge of the city, parked at a lookout Elvira once brought me to, and stared at the skyline she helped build. She knew. Of course she knew. She watched him rise, watched him corner her legacy like a throne, knowing it was all founded on smoke. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted DNA file Gabriel had sent earlier that day. My results confirmed. But now I had a new question. What would happen if Victor was forced to take the same test he weaponized against me? Because if Clause 12 of the Calderon Trust required bloodline descendants of Alexander Calderon, then Victor had just cut the branch he'd been standing on his whole life. And the best part, I didn't have to accuse him. I just had to let him say it first. The Calderon estate hadn't been that quiet since Elvira died. We were all there, every name on the letterhead, every heir who mattered, and a few who desperately wanted to. I wore black. Not for grief, for clarity. Victor sat at the head of the table, flanked by Harrison Mills and my two half-brothers, silent, dutiful, and visibly uncomfortable. He hadn't looked at me once. Bernard Whitmore entered last. Calm, measured. Carried nothing but a leather case and a small sealed envelope. The room stood still as he cleared his throat. "This is the official reading of Elvira Calderon's final will and testament," he began. "Executed legally and under sound mind. No alterations have been made since its final revision." Harrison raised a hand. "Before we proceed," he said smoothly, "Mr. Calderon would like to raise a legal concern regarding a listed beneficiary." I didn't blink. Here it came. Victor stood, hands behind his back, like a general preparing to deliver a death sentence. "There has been recent clarification regarding Rachel Calderon's parentage," he said, his voice flat but amplified by the silence. "DNA evidence confirms she is not my biological daughter. Therefore, she does not meet the criteria outlined in the Calderon Trust, requiring direct blood lineage to Alexander Calderon." He slid a sleek folder toward Bernard. "Certified copy." Bernard glanced at me, then opened it. Victor sat. Silence returned. But this time it was mine. I stood slowly. No drama, no rebuttal. Just truth in motion. "I won't dispute the test," I said. "It's accurate. Victor isn't my biological father." Gasps. Shifting chairs. A whisper from my cousin's wife I didn't bother to hear. "But that doesn't mean I'm not Calderon by blood." I pulled out an envelope and handed it to Bernard. "DNA proof. Gabriel Calderon, Elvira's biological son, is my father, which makes me a direct descendant of Alexander Calderon." Victor leaned forward, unreadable now, but I wasn't done. "Victor weaponized blood to erase me," I said, "so I used his standards." I reached into my bag again. Another envelope. "This is an adoption file." Bernard opened it. His hand paused, then kept turning pages. "Victor Calderon was never born to Elvira," I said. "He was adopted. Quietly, privately. No official record, but real. Verifiable." Harrison blanched. Victor finally looked at me, not with anger, not with denial, with fear. Bernard spoke. "If this documentation is authentic, then Mr. Calderon may not qualify as an heir under Clause 12 either." Victor stood. "That's a lie." Gabriel stepped forward from the back of the room. "It's not. I've known for weeks. Our mother never told you because she didn't want you to feel lesser. But you used that silence to make everyone else feel smaller." Bernard raised his voice just enough to pull the room back together. "There is one final item. A letter from Elvira. To be read only if lineage is challenged." He opened it, unfolded the page, and read aloud. "To my family gathered here today, if this letter is being read, then someone has questioned who belongs. Let me be clear, blood matters, but so does character. Victor, you have carried our name, but you have not honored its weight. Gabriel, you walked away, but never lost your compass. And Rachel, from the moment I met you, I recognized the fire, the instinct. You are without question my blood. I have accounted for every possibility in this room. The assets controlled by the Calderon Trust will pass according to the rules. But everything that was mine alone, my shares, my personal estate, my legacy goes to the one who understood what inheritance really means. Rachel." Finish what I couldn't. Silence. Then Victor laughed. Short, bitter. "This won't hold," he said. "You think you've won with a letter and a test." I looked him in the eye. "I didn't win," I said. "You lost. The second you turned blood into a weapon, and forgot where yours came from. I didn't go back to the Calderon estate for days. I needed time. Not to process what happened at the reading, because, let's be honest, most of it was already done in my head long before the first document hit the table. I needed time to understand what came after." Victor disappeared from the public eye. Harrison resigned quietly from the board. Rumor was his firm dropped him. My brothers didn't reach out, though one of them left a voicemail that started with "I had no idea" and ended with "I hope you burn the whole thing down." I didn't return the call. That wasn't the story anymore. Because after the dust settled, I realized something winning wasn't the point. Owning it was. And that began with the house, not the estate, not the land. Elvira's house. The one where she raised questions louder than suns. the one where she kept my seat at the Sunday table long after Victor pretended I didn't exist. It sat empty now, quiet, not sad, just waiting. The first night I walked back in, I didn't touch anything. Not the books, not the locked drawers, not even the study. I just sat on the staircase, where she used to braid my hair and say, "Legacy is not what you inherit. It's what you rebuild when everything else forgets you." It took me weeks to decide what to do. Sell it? No. Keep it for what? So I started reworking the floor plan. I called a local architect and told them I wanted to restore it, but not as a Calderon residence, as a foundation. A place for women cut out of legacies they helped build, for daughters erased, for names no one thought worth remembering. We kept the bones, stripped the facade, and opened the doors to something new, not a museum, a redefinition. And I never put my name on the signage. Because Rachel Calderon wasn't the point, she was the proof. Gabriel visited once during construction, said little, brought a plant I'm still trying not to kill. We sat in the unfinished kitchen, surrounded by plaster dust and memories, and he finally asked, "Do you hate him, Victor?" I said. He nodded. I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I replied, because hate means he still gets real estate in my head. Gabriel laughed once, the kind of laugh that sounded like maybe for the first time in decades, he believed in something again. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't have to, because I wasn't here to recover what I lost. I was here to build what no one could take. Elvira left me the house, but what she really gave me was the blueprints to make my own empire.